Hello, any comments for Imagine Crafts? Today we'll be creating this lovely wedding card. Let's go over some of the products we'll be using. Some StazOn Ink in Bordeaux, VersaMark Ink, some Imagine Crafts Terra Tape, Imagine Crafts On Point Glue, and Imagine Crafts Embossing Powder in Metallic Berry, which I'll show you in a bit. Let's get started on our project. We're going to start with the StazOn Ink in Bordeaux. We're going to remove the protective plastic, which keeps our ink nice and wet. We're going to be using this ink on some vellum. I'm going to use a finger dauber to get some of the ink and just make a little circle of ink here. You can make it as small or as large as you like. I'm making it to fit my flowers. I'm putting a little extra in the middle so it's nice and dark. Now vellum is a non-porous, so StazOn Ink works perfectly on it, but that means that the ink stays on the surface for a little longer. So you can let it sit and dry about an hour or so, or you can heat set it with your heat tool. I heat set mine with my heat tool. I went ahead and did that earlier. I did 4 little circles and I die cut some flowers. Now I'm using some dies from my stash. If you don't have dies, you can use a punch or hand draw and fussy cut some flowers. It's totally up to you. These are the flowers that I cut, and as you can see, they look so lovely and delicate. I put a little texture to them by curling the petals. To do that, I just use a stylus. You can use your bone folder or a pen and just curl each petal softly like that. I did this to all our flowers. I have 2 larger ones and 2 smaller ones. Now the color is bold on this side, but if you don't want the color so bold, just do it in the reverse and you'll have a subtle look because the vellum makes everything nice and subtle. I also cut 2 sprigs of leaves here, and I used a vellum that had glitter already on it. Again, if you don't have a die that's leaf or sprigs, you can use a punch if you have one, or hand cut them yourself. The point is just to take your time and create what you like. Okay, so we'll be using this A2 card, which is 8.5 by 5.5, and then we scored at 4 1/4 to create our A2 card. I also used a border die to make a little border on the bottom here. I just ran it across through my die cutting machine, and there's our little border. So here I had placed some Terra tape. I know it might be a little hard to see on screen, but this is where we're going to place some embossing powder. I'm not sure if you know, but our Terra tape works beautifully with embossing powder. So here it is, embossing powder in metallic berry, and it matches beautifully with the ink color. So we're going to remove the backing of our Terra tape. I'm going to flip it here so it's easier for me. And I'm going to bring in our coffee filter here in a second. That's just to collect my embossing powder. I was going to use this little tray, then I realized I'm going to make a mess. So here's my little coffee filter. And all I'm going to do is just go ahead and drop some of the embossing powder on there and shake off the excess. And I'll do this a couple times to make sure that my adhesive is completely covered in the embossing powder. I'm going to put away the extra just by pouring it back into the little bag, and it has a little Ziploc. It's a Ziploc bag, so it'll seal it. And I'm going to heat this with my heat tool. I'm going to start from the bottom and then I'll move to the top, because I always start on the bottom just so I don't want any of my extra powder to fly everywhere. I'll continue doing this until the embossing powder completely melts. Now what I like about it is that it adds nice texture to it. This is a beautiful color. Since it's metallic, it has a beautiful shine to it. I do this until it's completely set. Let me put my tool down so I can show you. So there you can see how lovely and shiny it is. Now I have a little bit of warping, but I'm not worried about it. I'm just going to reinforce my score, and I'll just bend it a little bit until we get it to lay flat. And it does lay flat. Let me get some of the extra powder that I did end up dropping on my desk. So now I'm going to stamp our sentiment, which is, I have this Mr. and Mrs. stamp and this is where we're going to use our VersaMark ink. We're going to emboss again with the same embossing powder, the metallic berry. Now, VersaMark ink is a nice clear sticky ink, so it'll hold the embossing powder. You won't see it here, it's hard to see on screen, but I can see it. So now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just sprinkle some embossing powder, shake off the excess, check it, put a little bit more. There we have it. All of a sudden, there it is, Mr. and Mrs. Now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to heat it. To heat set it. And it'll also, once it's all heat set, it's going to be nice and shiny. I do it again, front and back. It helps with minimize the warping as well. So now we're ready to adhere our lovely flowers. I use little pieces of tear tape on the back of each flower, and I repeated this throughout. I use my on-point glue to adhere my leaves. I put some acrylic blocks on the leaves just to keep it down because they were curling up. I'm going to put a little bit of on-point glue to each center of our flowers, and I'm going to add some jewels. I also used the on-point glue to add some jewels over by the sentiment. And now our card is complete. I'm going to bring it up closer for you to see. So here it is for you to see. You can see the jewels, the embossing, all the lovely leaves. It was quick and easy. Again, let's go over some of the products we used. Just showing you a close-up of everything. See how beautiful the texture is on that tape? So we used the StazOn Ink in Bordeaux on our vellum leaves and flowers, some VersaMark ink for our embossing of our sentiment, tape for embossing on the bottom, some embossing powder and metallic berry to create our card with some finishing touches of some jewels. The on-point glue was used for the jewels and for the leaves. It's a simple yet beautiful card, and you can customize this in any color you would like because we have a variety of colors in StazOn and embossing powders. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope you found some inspiration. Please remember to subscribe and push that bell for a notification.